Ryan G Travels host today, and yeah, this YouTube channel's been a few different things of late, from the garden building, raised garden bed building, to the lack of traveling, to the in-house concert series that was about 3 years ago. So those have been posted of late, finally, after doing some editing and looking over. And now I'm doing a little bit of traveling. I'm out here in what's called Lemoyne Park, which is in the Kingston area, fairly close to downtown Kingston. And we're out here with our friends. We got the birds, got Rachel in the background. She's doing some work over there. And yeah, so I just thought I'd chat about this area and what it has to offer. Where Kingston is situated halfway between Toronto and Montreal, roughly. It's was sort of a settler territory, and it acts as a fairly large city that has a lot to offer for jobs, life. It's in the belt where we got a bit of rust, kind of like Minnesota or places in the States like Chicago, and we get a bit of snow here. We'll get, anywhere from 2 to 4 centimeters usually at one dumping, and then a big one maybe 8 or 10, but we'll just get that about 15 or 20 times a winter. So right now we're in fall, so it's not too bad. It's like 15 degrees today, which is nice. And yeah, so I've been coming to Kingston now since meeting Rachel. Oh, hi guys, bye guys. And I've just experienced a lot of the bar scenes downtown, and it has a bit of a Halifax feel to it with lots of bars. And the cost of living is halfway between acceptable and not. It's not Toronto or Vancouver, but it's also not the cheapest out there, due to it being in a fairly developed city with good transit and healthcare and all that stuff at ready access. And because it's in a hubbed area, like a bit of a hub between Toronto and Montreal, it still gets a lot of professionals from the education standpoint that will teach at Queen's University, and that they end up having like great impacts in the community for the most part, in terms of design and future developments of buildings and things like that, and everything, healthcare. It all can be traced back to some research and some of the teachers here. So yeah, I am living in Belleville, which, Belleville's a fairly similar city to here. It has parks similar to this, a couple of them, not quite as vast, but but it's got a waterfront. The only difference is that Kingston, you can find beaches to swim at along the waterfront there, but actually in Belleville, despite it being on basically the same body of water that connects, it's Belleville, it's the Bay of Quinte, and this is the St. Lawrence River. There is no swimming areas in Belleville along the waterfront that I've seen, and so I would still swim at the Zwick's Park, and I had fishermen looking at me, I had people looking at me, and I said, you know what, I think it's okay. And I'd just climb in off the rocks, and what you have is the longer seaweeded area. So basically, that would be a main drawback for people of why not swim in an area. Well, you don't know what's in the deep seaweed there. So, and that's kind of been kind of nice for me to explore either way. And since then, I've been not swimming as much there this summer, but I did swim a bit by Rachel's place in near Queen's University, the waterfront there, and that has like distinct swimming areas which they actually developed and made ladders that are easy to use, and sort of even sandy beach. Somehow they made it able to contain sand and not have it all wash away like lickety split. So that was a really nice thing to discover too. And we actually did like the whole boat rentals where we took out kayaks and paddle boards, and you paddle around. And I think that's probably the one cool thing that I would really say about an area in southern Canada like this, is that for one, it has services that are kind of unique in that there's both reserve populations and other populations that live on these islands that are just south of Kingston. So if you look way down that channel there, you'll see these windmills, and there's a couple different islands down there, and that's one of them, and people live there all year. And it actually has a ferry that uses diesel propulsion and a cable system to track the ferry so that they don't have to worry about getting blown around in the wind as much. And that ferry runs all year long. And they have an air bubble system where they pump air through lines, and then that air will end up like breaking up the ice for the ferry. So even on the coldest days when the rest of this bay will be all frozen up, the ferry still has a path to travel. And so I'd say that's kind of neat to go discover all these little islands that are south of places like this. And in addition, there's also a ton of lakes and rivers that are just north of these areas that people can go, and you can grab a kayak and just sort of follow these lakes and rivers right under the 401 or around the 401, and then like follow them up to where they end up to. And there's countless ones of this. You could probably spend all summer just discovering every little nook and cranny along the St. Lawrence here, and then going up into more north just beyond the 401. And that might not be so easy because those same channels would go from Kingston all the way to Ottawa, which I've known a few people to do walks along that way. And I've known a few people to just take their boats all along the Ottawa River. So St. Lawrence River basically connects with Ottawa River with a bunch of locks in between. So that is also like a really awesome thing to do. And I'm pretty sure I'm right on that. Yeah. And so then there's also the Trent waterway system, which is just above that. And that one does connect also, and there you can take the Trent waterway system right up to Georgian Bay and everything after going through a ton of lakes and a ton of locks. So that's the water, the water aspect, where if you like, spending a bit of your discretionary income on boating and adventures and stuff like that, you can do it, with safety in mind. I've heard of stories where people took kayaks out, like deep sea, like ocean going kayaks types, and they ended up actually having huge storms. I think it was around Newfoundland. They were paddling and got caught in huge seas and just capsized, and were lucky to get themselves to shore without hypothermia type scenario. And so that risk is still here. You could go out on a day like today and the water temperature is cold enough that if you spent, maybe like 6 hours out there paddling hard, you might end up getting hypothermia and stuff. So the risk is always there, and that's the nature of the beast of nature, so to speak. So yeah, we have these ideas of what's fun, and then there's the whole bar scene. And I know I've had roommates in Belleville that wanted to go to Kingston just for a night out, where they have proper clubs and stuff like that. And so Belleville lacks that, and they have lots of bars but none that are like totally clubby. And so that would be like another thing, is that there's sort of that commuter corridor where it makes it kind of interesting to just bump along to all these little like medium and small cities along southern Canada here in Ontario. And you could do that all the way along Canada, except it gets a lot more rural after you leave Ontario and try to get through Saskatchewan like that. There's towns that are further and further apart. But yeah, and the Via Rail is probably like a great way to discover a lot of these small towns that have interesting histories, like whether it's related to mining resources out of the ground, or or just different people that have lived there and created the sort of legacy amongst others. It's all rather interesting. And so I'm from Toronto, and one of the reasons of me creating this channel was because I figured that after university I would go and travel more. And so I got to that point. I graduated, lived, and then I moved Brampton to Toronto to Halifax to Ottawa and then to Belleville. And so in that transition, when I went from Halifax to Ottawa, I graduated and then was very keen on finding a good job, and that didn't sort of go to plan. And so I ended up in this area where I'm like, well, I might not want to spend a whole lot of time abroad because I'm afraid of having to run back home and move to my parents' basement. And so I knew that for me, I needed to get my own feet under me, so to speak, and get enough savings so that I don't have to probably move back in with my parents, hopefully. That wasn't a great option for me for many reasons. And so I put off the traveling, and then I went back to school, and then again I put off traveling after graduating, and I put out an application. I had a couple companies. I worked with one straight out of school as I was just getting my last government license, and it was even going to be hard to leave that job, but I applied to one more, and then I got calls back, and they're saying, yeah, just drive to Napanee, Ontario, and go for your interview tomorrow, and then you can see about getting the job. So year and a half later now, about that later, I'm still at that job, and I've had the 2 weeks vacation per year and not totally used that to the full extent, although I did go to North Bay this summer and didn't take any video of that. But so that's sort of why my travel plans got on hold. And you meet someone special and you get a good job, and suddenly what is life like? What is traveling for 6 months? It doesn't seem valuable at all, but I know it's definitely still important to me. And that's one of the reasons I keep working hard and saving as much as I can. So that's sort of on my radar. And Rachel, she might end up taking a term to work somewhere abroad, and I would definitely take that chance. And so that's sort of where I'm at. So for now, I have the weekend travel, which is all about weekly organization. The more you get everything done at home, the more you can just run away for the weekend and do something on a budget, and including like budgeting for that trip and planning it all. So that's sort of the other thing. So to sum up the long boring story I just said is I will be going to Montreal, cities like Cornwall, anywhere in southern Ontario, and just trying to pick up little tidbits of information. So hopefully I can follow this video up with some mystery stories about Kingston, and really kind of find the juicy bits of what's going on here. What's made the people mad? What's made them sad? What's been the stories that just keep sticking for generation after generation? Of course, there's a whole prison and penitentiary system, and we have Canada's or Ontario's only maximum security prison not far down the road at Millhaven, which is just in Napanee, and so that's also kind of maybe a piece of it. It's not always great happy stories that come out of those, but they're stories nonetheless of how Canada is deciding to regulate its criminal system and keep its costs maybe a little bit better under control than compared to the States, which has seen the privatization of prisons and crazy things happening with that. So it's an interesting one. So I have already some juicy bits and about that, and I'll save those for another time. But for now, this is Lemoyne Park, and this is the beauty of being in Canada. It didn't cost us anything to park, anything to come here, and you probably have 2 or 3 of these in every little city along the southern Ontario here. So until you get to Toronto, and then you probably have to pay for parking wherever you go for that park situation, and maybe even entrance fees. So yeah, that's sort of what I would tell people who are wondering, should I move to the States or should I move to Canada? Well, you can move to Canada, and you can have healthcare as soon as you become Canadian citizen, which is usually 2 to 4 years, depending on how valuable you are to the government. And then you have like nature at your access here, and you have a little bit of an adjustment probably. A lot of places around the world don't put work as much as us here. It's not uncommon for us to put 10-hour days in at our jobs, Monday to Friday, or at least 4 days a week. And then, even tack on another 3 to those days sometimes, 3 hours. So, 13-hour day. But then on the weekend, we kind of recharge, and some of us do extreme sports. Like in these areas, they could be kite surfing, windsurfing. You often see that in the summer. And others are more home guys and home girls or home people, and they'll just cook, clean, and kind of get everything in order and take in some happy stuff that they want to go through on the weekend, whatever that is, And so that's sort of probably another piece of the channel, is just explain to people how complicated is it to move to Canada, and is it a whole bit of constantly trying to protect your liabilities and chance of injury, trying to just plan for future disasters, or can you just kind of live and let live? And for everybody with every different type of upbringing, the answer is some it's going to be really easy, and some it's going to be super hard. So maybe I'll end up getting into that a little bit more too, in terms of that. And feel free to check my other video about Ryan eating a grasshopper or cricket, something like that. I'll also do some bug eating videos just for the hell of it, because what's life? Got these things eating all this seaweed. I'm trying to prep myself for some travel abroad where there's some crazy street food, and I'm gonna eat it. So that's that, and I'm really looking forward to that. I have lots of friends in Vietnam, and lots of friends in the UK, which both places have tons of foods that I would just probably blow my mind for the first month. So that's pretty exciting. Anyways, I'll cap it at that. Have a good day, everybody.